Parliament's Xu-Nan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa to oppose this bill strongly. Here we are again, Madam Speaker, talking yet again about a bill that does not genuinely serve our communities. This bill, for all its worth, is complex, and there will be repercussions of this bill for years and generations to come. And future generations, Madam Speaker, will look at this bill as a repugnant bill that will harm and will not break the vicious cycle that we are seeing in Aotearoa in our criminal justice system. Let's start with some of the things we discussed during the committee stage. Fundamentally, we know that Aotearoa's constitutional arrangement, one of the fundamental principles of that is the principle of comity, whereby the legislature and executive is separate and independent from the judiciary, and that the judiciary, the court system, are allowed to operate independently and fully in their own right. Whereas we have heard from submitters that this bill, particularly the limitations that will place on the 40% cap to the discounts to sentencing, goes against that fundamental principle of our constitutional arrangements. We have questioned the minister during the committee stage over and over again, but all we receive from the minister, Madam Speaker, is sound bites and hot takes and not actually evidence-based material. Because we know that the minister and the government is not using evidence when it comes to deciding a bill like this. We questioned the minister around the concerns when it comes to party liability. The minister never once mentioned how the introduction of Section 66 of the Crimes Act 1961 under on-party liability will further harm particularly women in abusive relationship, because if they are accomplice to a crime, there is no way for them to withdraw from that in our current legal framework. Yet they are being punished both under the Crimes Act and now under the Sentencing Act. That is not about victims. We have seen that by not allowing young people the opportunity, because apparently when you commit a crime, and if you commit a crime again, suddenly you're not young anymore. Madam Speaker, that fundamentally goes against our agreement under the International United Nations Covenant Right of the Child and other international legal instruments, not to mention the UNDRIP, the United Nations right to the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, when we are looking at a bill like this. So fundamentally, we are going against what we signed up for internationally when we are introducing this. Why? Because of the fact that the minister and the government is hearing from people to say that, this is what's been happening, there are victims. Victims is important, but this bill does not address victims. The one section of this bill that does address victims is actually a rewording of an existing section of the Sentencing Act that already exists. There's nothing in this bill for victims other than the slogan of tough on crime, which we know does not work. If we look at any other country that has a tough on crime approach, but not addressing the social concerns and the social issues that people are experiencing, we know that it does not work. But let's talk about victims. I already mentioned that under the new aggravating factor that includes Section 66 of the Crimes Act, that we are not going to be seeing that women in particular in abusive relationship being supported by this legislation. We are not seeing how this legislation is going to break the cycle of violence, not break the cycle of poverty that we're seeing in our communities. The one thing the minister mentioned in terms of the fact that, yes, we have taken on the recommendation of the state, of the report on the state abuse and also faith-based abuse, but then the minister failed to mention that the one recommendation that would support those victims of the report by allowing a mitigating factor for those victims of state and faith-based abuse has not been taken up by the government. Why? Apparently it is too hard to manage. Yet we have seen new aggravating factors being introduced as a part of this bill, Madam Speaker. So what does this bill serve? What we are seeing here is something that will harm our young people. That is anti-fertility. We reaffirm that this government's only housing policy for Māori is by increasing prison beds. That is what we'll see as a result of this bill, Madam Speaker. We will see more young people who will be harmed as a result. We will see that lawyers and judges will find different ways, like the previous speaker, the Honorable Dr. Duncan Webb has mentioned, we'll see lawyers and judges have to find different ways of being able to balance what they see in front of them. Because let's be perfectly honest, those of us in this house are not judges, and very few of us are lawyers that have that experience in youth justice, in criminal justice, in Māori justice, in Pacifica justice, in migrant justice. Very few of us can hand on heart say that that is our background, that is our experience. So why would then we introduce a bill that does not listen to advice from officials, that does not listen to advice from the experts from our communities? We have heard submissions from Law Society of Aotearoa. We have heard submissions from community law saying that this is not going to address the levers of crime. Madam Speaker, for those of you who have been familiar with some of the earlier work of Plato in 375 BC, when he authored The Republic, talks about the rise of the demagogue. It talks about that when the government or when people or leaders, political leaders, take a popularist approach to law and legislation and running of the policy of the city-state and of the country, that it then fails to see the common good. That is in 4th century BC, Madam Speaker. And we are seeing a repeat of that right now with this government. We're seeing people not taking an evidence-based approach to the criminal justice system, but a popularist approach. What is justice? What is law? Because we have heard too many times in this house that if people commit a crime, commit an offense, that there should be punishment and there should be repercussions. But who determines that law, Madam Speaker? We do. So we decide who are the criminals in Aotearoa. We decide in this very house who commits crime in Aotearoa. That is not about justice. It reminds us of the obligation and responsibility that we have in this house, that we have to the people of our Aotearoa. If we really want to talk about crime and justice, where are the legislation I'm seeing around white-collar crime? Where is the legislation I'm seeing around tax invasion? If you really want to take a tough on crime approach, where are those who avoid paying tax in Aotearoa? We are not seeing that. Instead, what we're seeing is punishing the beneficiaries. We're seeing punishing those people who already find it difficult to put food on the table. That is not justice. That is not just. That is not how we make law. That should not be how we make law in this very house, Madam Speaker. So to conclude, the Green Party of Aotearoa absolutely will not support this bill because we do not see this bill as being one that will break the cycle of harm and break the cycle of violence in Aotearoa. We see this as a bottom of the cliff approach to crime and justice. What we want to see is everybody having a warm and safe home to live in. What we want to see is having a fair tax system so everyone is able to thrive, and this bill does nothing for that.
Todd Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Well, that was just really full on, but makes a hell of a lot of sense about, you know, we're not focusing on trying to punish necessarily the right people.
I mean, I can't cook as hard as him, but I can cook. This bill is not a replacement for prevention. It is purely reactionary. It will put more youth on a pipeline to join a gang. It won't prevent future victims. It won't reduce recidivism. It won't reduce poverty. We've already seen an increase in gang numbers and use of illegal drugs, and we already have a strained justice system. In summary, this bill is a waste of $150 million that could have gone towards more productive things.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook.